من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم من حسن إسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعنيه وكما قال عليه الصلاة والسلام. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, today's topic is an extremely important topic. It is a topic that is probably relative and something which is important and we can all relate to, and that is the topic of social media. Saying that might be surprising for some, as we usually see this as an issue for the youth, but in reality, probably the vast majority of us, if not every single one of us, are on some form of social media, whether we realize it or not. When I was doing some research for this lecture, I found out that even YouTube is considered a form of social media, which I did not know before. And I'm pretty sure every single one of us has used YouTube sometime or the other, if not on a very regular basis. So pretty much everyone are affected by this. And even if you don't want to call it social media, even if you want to call it just usage of technology in general, reading the news, etc., whatever it is that we do on technology on a regular basis, inshallah, this will apply to us. And the fact of the matter is that technology is something which is extremely beneficial. It is something that we ourselves as Muslims, we all benefit from. And Islam itself is not intrinsically averse to technology, right? Islam does not have a problem with technology at all. Rather, we see that Muslims were always at the forefront in technological advancement. We don't need to have a lecture on this at this point in time, but I'm sure many of us have heard about all the amazing different technologies that the Muslims themselves have developed, even to the point of things like the astrolabe, and there's so many other things. We know that algebra was, you could say, discovered or formulated by al-Khwarizmi, and there's so many great Muslim historians, philosophers, scientists, etc. So Muslims were always at the forefront, and even today, you do have different Muslims who are involved in technological advancements. So Islam itself is not intrinsically averse to technology, meaning that Islam doesn't say that technology is something which is bad, right? So we shouldn't get it twisted. Technology is a tool just like all other tools. So a tool can be used for something good and it can be used for something bad as well. A knife can be used to slaughter an animal that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered us to do, but it can also be used to kill somebody with oppression. And so we know that the knife is just a tool. It can be used for something good, for something which is ordered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and can also be used for something bad. And the same is technology in general, and within that technology falls in social media. And thus we need a nuanced approach, right? We cannot just have this approach that, everything is bad, social media is bad, just completely stay away from it completely, and we can't. It's haram to touch social media. It's haram to have Facebook, or it's haram to have Twitter, etc. There is a nuanced approach which is needed for us to fully understand what Islam teaches us about social media, so that we can benefit from it as much as possible and protect ourselves from the harms, some of which will be mentioned today, inshaAllah. And technology can help us advance in our deen and dunya. There's so many different ways, but just to give one example, how our technology, in dunya it's very obvious, we don't even have to mention it, right? We have, as we know, self-driving cars, self-driving taxis, which obviously would make things much easier for us. Even just in general, all of the different modes of transportation like trains and cars and everything that was just invented recently, we see how easy they've made life for us. Even simple things like, for example, WhatsApp has made it so easy for people to contact their loved ones in other countries, whereas just 15, 20 years ago, some of the young guys here probably don't even know such a thing exists, like calling cards, where people would literally have to go and buy calling cards. They would have to rub off the thing on the back. They would have to type in that number, and only then they could call their loved ones, and they would have to pay, sometimes large, pretty good amounts of money, because like $1 a minute or 50 something cents a minute. And so every minute you're on the clock and you have to pay. And now WhatsApp has made all of that free. You can even do a video call and see the person that you're talking to. This is obviously something which we can benefit from. So there are benefits to technology in terms of dunya and also even in terms of deen, right? There's certain softwares which have been developed recently through which you can search thousands and literally millions of different books that have been written from the past, all the way from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam until now. You can search all of them and you can just press one keyword and see every single book that word was written in from the beginning till the end. And there's so many benefits from this. There have been so many new researches that have been coming out in terms of even the dini sciences, which have actually moved many of these sciences further and evolved many of these sciences. And so we can benefit greatly from technology, even in terms of our understanding of deen as well. But obviously, we shouldn't get that twisted. You know, we hear people saying with such misguided and strange statements like, "Oh, you know, I have the entire corpus of hadith at the click of a button, so I have more right to do ijtihad and to become a person who extracts ruling from the Quran and Sunnah than even Imam Bukhari or even then Imam Abu Hanifa or Imam Shafi'i. You know, I have all these at my fingertips. He didn't have it at his fingertips. That's just a very shallow perspective, and it's a very deluded perspective to think that you have more knowledge than all of these great ulama, rahimahumullah ta'ala. But we won't go into details into that. But in general, if we know its limits, then we know that technology can actually help us advance greatly in our deen and dunya as well. And so rejecting it outright would be foolhardy. And we know that ultimately, no matter how somebody may seem to be against technology, they have no choice but to use it in this world. Like nowadays, for example, a smartphone, obviously, if there are ways out, honestly, if you make an effort, there are phones actually coming out through which you can, you know, basically get yourself a dumb phone and you can stay away from it. But in general, a smartphone is almost required in today's world. Even if you try to stay away from it, it's extremely difficult. There are so many things that you need it for. And so rejecting it outright would be foolhardy. At the same time, just because there are some benefits to technology doesn't mean we ignore its harms. Sometimes the harms of specific aspects of technology can actually be greater than the benefit. And we know the general rule that if the harm outweighs the benefit of something, then it's something we should not do, something we should stay away from. Anybody know an ayah of the Quran that indicates towards that? The ayah about khamr, right? About khamr and also maisir, which is gambling, right? Allah says they ask you about gambling and about khamr, which is alcohol, and about gambling. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فِيهِمَا إِثْمٌ كَبِيرٌ, that both of these things have great harms. وَمَنَافِعُ لِلنَّاسِ, they also have benefits for people. So they do have benefits, but Allah says, وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا, that the harms of both of these things and the sin accumulated to these things are greater than the good that is in these things. So that's a general principle we can understand, that if the harms of something are outweighing the benefit, then that's something we should stay away from. And so when we look at technology, we should look at it in terms of benefits and harms in terms of our deen. And thus we can say that there is no one-size-fits-all rule for social media. So we cannot say it's halal in every single circumstance, and we cannot say it's haram in every single circumstance. Rather, it depends on the situation, it depends on the person as well, as will become clear, inshallah, when we go through the different slides. And lastly, just one last point about technology in general before we go into specifics regarding social media, that a technologically advanced nation is not necessarily a successful one. A lot of times we see, everybody, mashallah, they have their idea of how this ummah can be revived and how we can bring this ummah back to the greatness that it once was at. If I was to ask everybody in this room, I would probably get like a bunch of different answers. Each person will have their own unique, specific answer as to how we can come back to the situation, the great situation that we were upon for centuries upon centuries in our history, and come out of this mess that we have got ourselves into. One thing that you may hear people saying is that, oh, the problem is that us as Muslims, we're not technologically advanced. We don't have all the different tools that the Western nations they have, and thus we are behind in these things. Maybe in some aspects this may be true, but overall you will see that some Muslim countries, they're actually more technologically advanced than even America. Right? You go to some of the Gulf countries, for example, you see that they have a lot of technological advancements that we're not even using here yet. And when it comes to money and things like that, there's tons and tons of money. So a lot of times the issue with regards to these countries is not, and the deen, the ummah as a whole, is not technological advancement, and nor is it specifically wealth. Even in this country, for example, there are many Muslims that are involved in the tech industry. So it's not something that we're completely lagging behind in, although if we had more strategic engagement in it, it would be beneficial. The main issue is the lack of deen. And if we had deen in our lives, then we would be utilizing the technology for what is beneficial. But because we do not have deen in our lives, then we are not utilizing that technology for beneficial things. Rather, unfortunately, in many cases with these Muslim countries, they're using this very same technology to do oppression on their very own Muslims, whether it be the brothers and sisters in another place or even within their own place, doing surveillance that is not, that breaches people's privacy. So the fact of the matter is, the most important thing for the revival of this ummah is the deen. And then once we have the deen, then inshallah, all the technological advancement will actually be beneficial for us, right? So again, I'm not making the point that we shouldn't make technological advancement, but the point is that the deen coming into our lives is more important. And then we will be able to, inshallah, harness all of that beneficial, we have all this intellectual, richness in our community. We have a lot of people, mashallah, who are involved in all these different fields. But unfortunately, a lot of times when they get into the fields, when they get into the corporate ladder, then unfortunately, a lot of times they sell out their deen and they're involved in things which are not supposed to be involved in, and then they ultimately lose our deen. I can actually mention specific examples of people that I know of that this happened to. And so it is something that we have to be cognizant of. We have to realize the true factor due to which we see that the Muslims are lagging behind, which is the lack of connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And everything after that, it follows thereafter. Now, when we have that introduction behind us, let's talk specifically about social media. So I talked about the harms of social media and the challenges that it presents to us in two ways. One is the challenge that it poses to humanity at large, meaning this is not specific to Muslims, right? Even non-Muslims are having these conversations, to the point that literally just, I think 2-3 days ago, Australia actually signed a bill that they approved a bill that it is illegal for people under 16, for youth under 16 to use social media. And the social media companies have 1 year to figure out how they're going to make that happen and put measures in to make sure that none of these youth will actually try to go around the ban. It's not going to be a simple thing like, they're asking me my birthday, I'm just going to put an earlier date, right? They're going to have to actually put in some measures to try to make sure that people under 16 are not using this technology. And there were debates going on for literally, weeks and weeks and for a long time between all the members of parliament when they were trying to pass this bill. And there were a lot of very interesting discussions. We as Muslims should also kind of read those discussions and read the arguments of the people to see that, look, it's not only Muslims that are talking about the harms of social media. We shouldn't get it twisted and thinking, oh, these Muslims are so backwards. I gave a talk similar to this at another masjid. In the end, the brother was like, again, the point I was making was not that we should leave social media completely, but even then I was mentioning a lot of harms of social media. And the brother was like, no, brother, we cannot get away from social media. We cannot escape from it. You shouldn't tell people go away from it, rather just, teach them to use it in a good manner. But we have to realize that we're not the only ones as Muslims who are talking about the harms of social media. This is something which is going on even in countries, Western countries like Australia, and even closer to home. If you search online, literally just Google the harms of social media, you'll get a plethora of articles, and there's so much research that is being done on the harms of social media to younger people in general, and specifically and in general as well, harms that social media poses to humanity at large. So one of the biggest issues is addiction, right? Because social media is designed in such a way that it activates the dopamine in your brain, the hormone in your brain, which gives you pleasure. And because of this, when you engage with social media and you get that dopamine rush, for example, you get a notification that somebody liked your status or your tweet, or you refresh your screen and you find a new video or you find a new set of statuses on your news feed or whatever. Whenever you get a notification and you see something new, that creates a dopamine rush in your brain, and your body is designed to keep on desiring to do something that causes that dopamine rush. And this is what causes addictive behavior. And this is why we may find ourselves sometimes checking our phone compulsively, right? As soon as we get a moment of free time, we're pulling out our phone. and we're refreshing even though we know there's nothing else there. Like we've already exhausted our newsfeed, yet we're just refreshing our newsfeed again, and we see the same stuff over and over again, right? That's a sign of addictive behavior. So something we should all read about. There's plenty of material out there, but the fact is, this is not by an accident. This is by design. All these companies, remember, none of these companies who make these social media, platforms, they are not out there for your benefit, right? They don't want the best for all of you. Rather, they're just trying to make money. These are multi-billion-dollar industries. So they're not trying to benefit you when they make these social media platforms, right? Even if they're free, right? Sometimes we say, oh, it's free, so what's the harm in it, right? But as one sheikh said, he very aptly, he said that when something is free, then it's not actually, nothing in life is actually free, right? And so when they claim something is free, you're not paying any money, you in reality are the product, right? You have to question that, how are all these companies making billions and billions of dollars off social media if it's absolutely free, right? The answer is that your time and your attention is the product that's being sold. So you're literally wasting your time, and all these companies, all these CEOs that are making billions of dollars off of your time that you are wasting, and you're not able to benefit in this life and in the hereafter. That's something that we really have to keep in mind, that this is by design, right? This addiction that is caused through social media is by design. They literally do so much, they spend so much millions of dollars of research to make sure people get addicted to these social media outlets, so that they can get more and more money. Because the more time you spend on social media, the more you click on the ads, the more benefit it will be to them, and the more money they will make. And so they will try their best, even just deactivating social media, like different things like Facebook, for example. It takes forever to try to do it because there'll be so many different things. Oh, are you sure you want to deactivate? Maybe you can try this, maybe you can try that. Why is it that you're deactivating? They'll have so many different messages just to try to deter you and stop you from deactivating your Facebook. And even then, you're not deleting it, you're just deactivating it. It's very easy for you to just pull it up again. If you want to actually delete it, then it's actually even longer and more difficult process if you want to completely delete your social media account. This is all by design, right? They want to make it as hard as possible for you to escape the matrix, so to call it. So we have to be cognizant and realize this great harm of addiction, because it literally can be an addiction similar to addiction to drugs, but something that we don't realize. We don't think about it in that manner, but it actually is a very real thing. And so we have to be cognizant and realize this harm. Another thing that it causes is depression. And how is that? In many different ways, right? One is low self-worth, right? You're on social media, you're seeing other people's videos, right? Maybe you're seeing a video of somebody posting a picture with their friends, they're having a good time. It's a weekend, for example, and you're here sitting at home scrolling your TikTok or your Facebook or your Twitter, and you're seeing all of them having a good time. And so you start feeling bad that, oh, how come I don't have friends like them? How come their friend group is always doing amazing and chill things while, we don't do all those things? Especially as a Muslim, we know that there are limits for us. We cannot do everything that non-Muslims do. So if you have non-Muslim friends on your social media, now you're seeing them doing all things that look fun, but obviously we know that they're haram. Maybe they're engaging in a haram relationship, or maybe they're drinking alcohol, they're doing drugs, or whatever they're doing, that they're posting pictures about that on social media. They look like they're having so much fun. And now you yourself start feeling low self-worth, that, oh, how come I can't be like that? And you start feeling bad about yourself. And you start having an inferiority complex. You start thinking that you're worse than them. When in reality, we don't realize that social media is designed to be such that it's designed to make everybody seem like they have the perfect life. Everybody will post snapshots that'll make their situation look like the best possible situation. They'll take a picture of their food in the best possible angle. It may not even look that great, but they'll take it from a specific angle, they'll add a filter, and it'll look absolutely amazing. And similarly, posting pictures of themselves happy with their spouse, even though they may be fighting with their spouse every single day, but they're not going to put that on Facebook. They're going to be putting them being happy and having a good time. People are like, wow, this is a picture perfect couple. And then you have news of these celebrity couples. Even amongst Muslims, you have these things, unfortunately. And everybody thinks that they're best friends and they both love each other and they're having such an amazing time because that's what they show on social media. Then you'll hear that they had a bitter divorce literally months after they're posting as if they're madly in love with one another. That is because what's on social media is a mirage. Everybody's only showing what they want people to see, right? And that's how social media is it creates a virtual reality which is different to the reality on the ground, right? So somebody might seem to be the best of all people on social media, but when you meet them in real life, you realize like, okay, this person is completely different. That's something that's a new challenge that social media poses, that people are allowed to create whatever image they want of themselves rather than how they truly are. Also, it can contribute to loneliness, that a person feels like, again, that they don't have friend groups like other people do. They're not hanging out with other people like other people are, and so they start feeling more and more lonely. And to add to this, right, mental illnesses, there's actually a lot of research that shows, specifically when teens use social media and people who are younger use social media, that's a time when their brain is rapidly developing. And so utilizing social media, especially for more than 3 hours a day, it actually has great harms in terms of the mental growth of youth as well. And so this is why a lot of times you see when some youngsters are like addicted to the screens, whether it be social media or games or whatever, you can kind of tell through their personality and through certain aspects of their basically their demeanor, that this is a problem, right? Again, we shouldn't ever feel like think badly of such people or judge such people. Rather, we should want to help. And honestly, every single one of us is probably addicted in some way, so we have absolutely no right to judge other people and think about other people. But this is a fact that it leads to actually mental illnesses. Then inadequate sleep, right? Why? Because a lot of times, when are people scrolling on social media? Maybe after they've done work or went to school in the day. Now, in the evening, they're using social media, and you know that the light in our phones and in our computers, in our TVs, etc., is such that it makes it difficult for you to fall asleep. Or sometimes you're just lying in your bed, you're scrolling and scrolling, and sometimes you go into a rabbit hole. You keep scrolling, you click this comment, you click that comment, and you end up somewhere a different side of Twitter or YouTube you never even been on before. And before you know it, you spent hours on this website when you only just wanted to check one thing, and it may not have even been on that app. Maybe you wanted to check something else on your phone. Maybe you picked it up to put on an alarm, but you're just like, okay, let me just check this social media before I do that. And before you know it, you spent an hour, 2 hours on it, even though you literally just wanted to turn on your alarm to go to sleep, right? So this is why social media leads to inadequate sleep. And we know that if a person doesn't have enough sleep, then there's a lot of issues and problems that leads to in physically and mentally as well. Lack of social skills as well, right? Because if you only are able to discuss with people when you're online, then that's a problem, right? If you feel more comfortable sending somebody a text rather than seeing them face to face, then that's a problem, right? Especially when there's a situation where you have some sort of confrontation or you have some disagreement with somebody, we should learn to be able to speak to them face to face. A lot of times you see, especially the younger generation, they kind of get away from having to face their problems by just texting or messaging a brief message and thinking that can get around it. No, there's no replacement to actually going face to face and ironing out your differences with that person, whether it even be your parents or whether it be anybody else. Unfortunately, you see that a lot of times, even major decisions that are being made in life, you'll see that youngsters would just text their parents, because they feel like, okay, well, I have to tell my parents about this, but I don't have the guts to face them and tell them, so they'll just text them and message them and kind of run away from their having to actually face their parents and have an emotional discussion with them. So it's leading to a lack of social skills. It's leading to difficulty in people actually being in real life and having conversations and meeting in real life. And I think I put inadequate sleep twice. It's a mistake. So that's general problem, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's much more if you do some research on it. There's a lot of harms that social media causes us. Then there are challenges that social media poses to Muslims specifically, right? The greatest challenge in general that can be posed to a Muslim are sins, right? All these things that I mentioned are secondary. The greatest challenge for a Muslim, the worst thing that can happen to a Muslim is to commit a sin, right? We know obviously the worst sin is disbelief. That's the worst of all sins. But in general, sins are something which are very bad. No matter how small the sin may seem, we shouldn't think of it in that manner. We shouldn't think that, oh, it's just a small sin. We shouldn't get caught up in, okay, this is a major sin, this is a minor sin, so it's not a big deal. No, absolutely not. We do not know which sin of ours can be the means of us entering into the fire. We do not which sin of ours could be the means of us gaining, being thrown into the fire and facing, being unsuccessful for a long period of time in the hereafter. And there's multiple ahadith which indicate towards this, that many times, for example, a person will just say a single statement. They won't think much of it, but because of that one statement, they'll be thrown into the fire for a long period of time. So we don't know which sin it is that will cause us so much harm. As one scholar describes it, we shouldn't think of it as major sin or minor sin. We should just think of every single sin as a major sin and try to avoid it, in terms of the fact that it will make Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upset with us. Right? We should never ever look down upon any sin. And he describes it as a fire. Right? For example, even a small little fire that's a match on a match, or even a cigarette, that can end up leading to a huge forest fire that destroys acres and acres of forest. Right? Even the smallest match. Right? Whereas you can have a huge fire in general, but then if it's contained, then it won't really have much harm. Rather, it will only, for example, a bonfire. You have a huge bonfire that you make, and it stays contained. So in the same way, again, I'm not obviously justifying major sin, but there could be a major sin, but after tawbah, after asking Allah forgiveness, really turning back to Allah, begging Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, the harms of it can be mitigated and decreased. Whereas sometimes we commit minor sins, we don't even think much of it, we don't even do tawbah, we don't even turn back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it can have so much harm on our deen that, na'udhu billah, that it could lead to a person leaving the fold of Islam. So we should never, ever, ever look down upon any sin, right? And as one poet eloquently said, "La tahqiranna saghiratan innal jibala min al hasa." Don't look down upon and think lowly of any sin, because even mountains are, at the end of the day, are made up of small, small pebbles, right? So these small pebbles, once they become more and more and more, it becomes a mountain of sins. So we should never ever look down upon any sin. We should realize that every single sin is harmful for us and it can be a means of our destruction. So once that is out the way, now what are some sins that social media can make us more privy to and make us more likely to commit? One of the most important is zina. Zina, as we know, is actually a major sin. And unfortunately, a lot of zina nowadays, zina has become easier than ever to commit nowadays, and a huge part of it is social media, right? A lot of, I don't have any percentages out there, but I would say a huge percentage of whatever zina, adultery that happens, it is through the means of social media. Whatever app is used, it is through the means of social media. So that's referring to the actual act, right? So how does that act occur? It doesn't just occur out of nowhere, right? There are steps, right? That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "La taqrabu zina." Don't even come close to zina, because Allah knows us, and Allah knows that a person gets to that point of committing adultery and doing this evil act through steps, right? The first of those steps is the eyes, right? The zina of the eyes, which when we see something we're not supposed to see, if we see somebody of the opposite gender that we're not supposed to be looking at, then that automatically creates a desire in the heart, and that's where everything goes south. Then you want to talk to that person, you slide into their DMs, you start speaking to them, and slowly, unfortunately, it turns into zina. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, don't even come near zina, meaning all the steps that lead towards zina, you have to completely cut them off. And so this is one major sin, whether it be actual zina or even just zina of the eyes, right? And something that's so common that unfortunately we don't even realize. We have to, again, change our definition, right? Even a definition of like pornography, for example. We don't have the right definition. We just define pornography as how the West defines it, which is unfortunately is very explicit, their definition. Whereas for us, even looking at a non-Muslim's awrah is something which is impermissible for us, right? So we shouldn't just think as long as it's not pornography, everything else is fine. Rather, we should know that we're not allowed to look at females, especially with desire, and when they're showing their awrah, when they're showing parts of their body that they're not supposed to be showing, then we're absolutely not supposed to be looking at them. So a lot of times we'll be scrolling through our newsfeed, we won't even realize that we're seeing so many females. And obviously, if you have social media added on as friends, you have females added on your social media as friends, then you see obviously their pictures as well, which is something we should not be doing, which is something which is impermissible. But let's say even if you don't have any of them as your friends, but automatically certain apps especially, right? There's certain apps through which you can actually protect yourselves from these things. But certain apps, it's kind of difficult for yourself to actually prevent yourself from looking at the opposite gender. And so because of this, it becomes very difficult to avoid the zina of the eyes, and that's something which blackens your heart. That's another great harm of sin. It's not just in the hereafter, but even in this dunya, the more sins you commit, the more your heart becomes darkened, and the more you stop caring, right? Sometimes you wonder, why don't I care so much about my deen? Why is it so hard for me to focus in my salah? Why is it so hard for me to recite Quran, right? Why is my heart not in it? It may be because we've committed so many different sins that we've desensitized ourselves to all good. And so we have to realize this fact, and a huge part of it is protecting our gaze, protecting at what we look at. So a lot of times we look at and scroll on these apps, and we don't realize that in 1 hour how much zina of the eyes have we committed. And so we have to think, and inshallah towards the end we'll mention some solutions as to how we can stay away from this. Then the sins of the tongue, right? A lot of times you don't realize that what you say on social media, what you type, is you're actually committing a sin, right? Backbiting while typing it up is the same as backbiting when you say it with your tongue. So we shouldn't think that it's any different. And it's interesting, there was a statement, I don't know if it's accurate, but there was a statement that was attributed to Mike Tyson. It was a funny statement, but it has truth to it. He said that social media and the internet has made people comfortable in saying things that they would never say into people's face because they would get punched in the face for saying it, right? So people, when they get online, they realize they're behind a screen. They call them keyboard warriors. And so people, they say things to other people, they're so rude to other people, and they would never ever say that to a person's face in real life. And this is just a result of not having to face them face to face. Again, why a lot of people, they prefer to just avoid conflict by talking to people online, or sometimes they'll even say inflammatory things, but they'll say it online to kind of avoid having to actually confront the person in person. So a lot of times we will be making fun of people, we will be backbiting, we will be making people feel bad. All of these are sins of the tongue, and all of these will be held to account on the Day of Judgment for these things. And the sins of the tongue are not something to be taken lightly. A person can be thrown into the fire for the sins of the tongue, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ indicates towards us. And also the hadith that I mentioned earlier, that a person could say a statement from their tongue that can be so harmful to that person that it can be thrown into the fire because of that. So that's another great harm, a great sin, and in general, something that we should be avoiding. Then publicizing evil and normalizing it. Right? That's another great sin, a great harm of social media. And one is that you're committing a sin, but you're hiding it. You're ashamed of it, and you're not showing it off to people. But one is to brazenly and openly sin and to now post about it on social media. That is something which is a great harm. The hadith mentions that every one of my ummah, who is even the person who is sinful is included in this, is forgiven. Every person in my ummah is safe, except for the one, إِلَّا الْمُجَاهِرُونَ, except for those who do these evils openly in front of people. Those people are in great danger, and it's possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forgive them, because not only are they committing a sin, and the Sahaba asked the Prophet what he meant by this, and he further elaborated that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had hidden his sin the night before that he had committed, yet he goes and he breaks this hijab, this covering that Allah had put over his sin, and he actually exposes his own sin to other people. He starts showing off and bragging about his sins to other people. So this is something that we may fall into without even realizing in social media. We'll commit a sin, either we'll actually post a video of the sin itself, or we will talk about committing that sin on social media, and thus we will get even more sin, and it's possible that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forgive us because of our shamelessness. And the harm of this is that it actually encourages other people to do that same sin as well, right? For example, when I was doing the Ifta course in which we answer questions, there was a question that came in, and a person said that, I saw a video of my friend. I'm in a group chat with some of my friends, and I saw a video of one of my friends committing zina. He actually posted a video on this group chat. Right now, how terrible of a thing that is, right? He wants to commit a sin, but then posting a video of it in a group chat of friends. And he said, now once he posted that video, I've never thought about this before, but since he posted that video, now I can't get the thought out of my mind that I want to commit zina as well. So when you're doing that, then you're actually encouraging other people And you will be held accountable for every single person who sees that and has that desire and then commits that sin. You will be held accountable for that. That's why Qabil, the one who killed his brother, the son of Adam alayhi salam, killed his brother, the hadith mentions that he will have a share in all the sin that will be all the sin of the people who will kill another person until the day of judgment, because he started this trend of killing. He was the first person to kill another person oppressively in this world, and so he will hold the sin of all those people who do it afterwards. In the same way, the hadith mentions that whoever starts an evil trend, then that person will hold the burden of that sin until the day of judgment. So this is a huge harm of social media that we have to be cognizant of and be very careful of perpetuating it. Another great harm of social media is wastage of time. Social media wastes a huge amount of time. Is something that I don't really need to talk about. It should be plainly obvious to all of us. You just wanted to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you end up spending hours and hours on social media. Again, it's designed to be like that. And again, as the stat I posted in the little blurb we put for this lecture, the average American spends about over 2 hours of their time on social media. That means every single person in America on average is spending over 2 hours. And obviously, the different demographics, the younger people are spending even more time, like more than 3 hours on social media. Now, if we really contextualize that, that's 10% of your life, right? And that's not even including, if you take out the hours of sleep, it's even more than that. It's a huge percent of your waking hours are spent on social media, right? That's something which is kind of scary if we think about it. We only have this one chance to make things good in the hereafter. We only have this one chance to make ourselves a home in Jannah, right? So if we're going to waste all that time, then isn't that a great sorrow for us? And isn't that a great loss for us if we're going to waste all that time that we have to do all this good in this life? Time is the most important and valuable commodity that we have after Iman. And so for us to waste it in this manner is very sad, right? And a lot of times people realize this. They realize that I could be benefiting, even if not in terms of deen, at least in terms of dunya, right? You're getting some sort of benefit if you're doing something else, even if you're studying, whatever it is, right? But unfortunately, when you're on social media, you're not benefiting in terms of dunya, nor are you benefiting in terms of deen. So this is something that we really have to be careful of and realize. Then it occupies the mind as well, right? So automatically, whatever you do on a regular basis is going to stick in your mind. And whatever you're doing during the day is going to affect you in your salah, right? So when you pray your salah, automatically what you've been doing most of the day will come to your mind. So if you're doing dhikr of Allah and remembering Allah most of the day, you're doing things related to deen, then that's what's going to come in your mind in salah, and that's a good thing, right? But unfortunately, probably including myself, unfortunately, that's not usually what happens. And so when you're on social media all day, especially right before salah, right? Something we should really avoid. If you're on social media right before salah and then you just put away your phone and then you go directly into salah, then obviously you think you're going to be able to fully concentrate. No, you're going to think about the last thing you just read on social media, especially if it was something which was very jarring and very shocking. You're going to be thinking about that your entire salah. So it's something which occupies your mind. And also it can worsen your character. Not everybody, obviously, but many times it worsens your character, and that's what I alluded to before, when people are willing to say things they would never say in real life. Also, it detracts from real life relationships, right? A person can organize a gathering. You're hanging out with your relatives, your friends, yet every single person will be sitting there. They'll all be on their phones, right? So even though you're physically close, but your heart is more connected to the person you're talking to or the people whose status you're reading on your phone, right? So it's actually taking away from your real life relationships. And a lot of times, you're having a conversation with your spouse or with your parents. They want to have a genuine one-to-one conversation, or even your children. Yet you're too busy on your phone, and you're not fully in the conversation, right? If you're halfway, between talking to a person and you're checking your phone, there's no way that your attention is fully there. And so this is something that takes away from your relationship, and a lot of times it harms your relationship with your parents, with your children, and with your spouse. On top of that, it gives you a sense of contentment, right? Let's say, for example, you live a little bit far from your parents or even close to your parents, but you, instead of actually going to visit them, you just like something that they posted on social media, or you just send them a brief message or a comment. You think that's enough, right? And you kind of think that, okay, alhamdulillah, I fulfilled my duty. Whereas in reality, of course, it's something which is great, but it's something that gives you a false sense of contentment when you could be doing much more. And it's an irony because social media is meant to connect, but a lot of times it can become a means of disconnect. But it can also be a great means of connecting, and that we'll get to, inshallah, when we talk about the benefits. I'm not going to only talk about the harms. Don't worry, we're going to get to the benefits as well, inshallah. So yeah, you can have 10 people in a room, they can all be on the phone, and it's literally pointless for them to be in that gathering. Also, it makes you feel entitled to share your opinion about everything. You'll have people on social media who think they know it all, whether it be politics, whether it be the deen, whereas they would never have that platform before social media. Whereas nowadays you hear all sorts of terrible takes on different things, especially related to deen. Everybody thinks that they have a right to talk about, I think this ruling should be like this, even though you have absolutely no qualifications. That's another harm of social media that we should realize. Then photos, right? Nowadays, some are recommending that you should try to avoid having your photos online. Why? Again, it's something which is difficult to do, right? It's possible that pretty much everyone has some sort of photo online. But the issue is that there's something called deepfake in the era of AI, in which people can take your pictures and videos that you have online, and they can literally make a fake video of you, and it could look absolutely real. And there's a lot of scandals going on where people think that a famous person said or did this, and there's a video going viral, even shuyukh, right? But then later on it becomes apparent that, oh, this was an AI, right? And unfortunately, sometimes they even take these videos and they depict them doing filthy and haram acts, and imagine seeing your face on it, right? So this is why another thing that can harm you that can come out of social media. Now, all that being said, again, it's not all harms, right? There are actually some great benefits that we can get out of social media. One of the greatest is keeping connected, especially keeping family ties, right? A lot of times it may be difficult, especially if you have a lot of family, it may be difficult to call them on a very regular basis, on a weekly basis. But at least if you have social media, you're on WhatsApp groups with them, for example, then you can still be involved with them, have conversations with them. And in that way, you'll have some sort of connection to them, and it can help you to keep your ties strong. And obviously we know that keeping family ties is a very important part of the deen. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells in multiple places in the Quran that we're supposed to keep these ties with our families. And even a hadith as well. There's one hadith that mentions that a person who wants, barakah in their rizq, then they should take care of their family ties. And so it's a very important fact that unfortunately a lot of us, including myself, who were brought up here in the West, we neglect, right? Especially if our family is back home in the countries where our parents immigrated from, we very much neglect this. We feel maybe there's a disconnect. Maybe we don't speak that language so well. But we have to make an effort to keep the family ties as a very, very important part of our deen. And so social media can actually help us do this in a great manner. But again, we should also be cognizant that sometimes it's not enough. Sometimes we have to take the extra effort, maybe to actually go and visit them, or at least to pick up the phone and call them. Especially when there is something sadness or happiness, right? These are the two times with which we should be with our family members. We should call them. We should show that we are with them, to share with them when they become sick, or when somebody in the family passes away, or when there's some happy occasion like a wedding or somebody's child was born, then we should show that we are with them. So social media makes that a lot easier. Then networking as well, right? It could be a means of connecting. For example, some people may live in an area where there's not so many Muslims, so they can actually connect to a lot of Muslims through social media and have a good environment online where they cannot have that in person. Alhamdulillah, we don't really have that issue here. We have plenty of Muslims here, alhamdulillah. But besides that, connecting people, for example, who are in your field in terms of your worldly profession, and you want to connect with people who are in your field, but they're, mashallah, connected to the deen, for example, and you want to use that connection to further the cause of deen in this country, that's another beneficial thing. Then you can have beneficial dini reminders, spread knowledge on social media, although I feel like sometimes this is overrated, right? A lot of the knowledge on social media is just sound bites that are basically clickbait and are designed to get attention, right? And those hours that you spend on social media, and then you say that, oh, but I learned so much. I'm following this and this such and such scholar. I'm following such and such sheikh, so I benefited so much. But in reality, there's not going to be stuff of much substance on social media. You're not going to be, learning like an actual course worth of knowledge just through scrolling through social media. You're going to learn very basic, superficial things, usually just a feel-good reminder. Again, sometimes those things can be beneficial, right? You're scrolling social media, you see something, it really shocks you, and that's a good thing, alhamdulillah. That's a benefit that we can talk about over here. But sometimes we feel like we're spending hours on social media, oh, because I'm following such and such sheikh, so I'm benefiting. But in reality, if you just sat down and read a book, you would benefit much more. Or if you join some class that your local masjid is offering. I'm not saying anything, I'm not trying to advertise my classes or anything. But if you were to sit in such a class, then you would actually benefit a lot more than you did spending that hour or more scrolling on social media. So that's something to be cognizant of, but it can be a great means and a tool to reach people who we cannot otherwise reach. And so there's also a great benefit of social media. And this is a key thing, raising awareness about important issues, right? We know the whole Palestine genocide, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for them. One thing that has really shifted the tide in the entire world is social media, because the narrative has gotten out, right? Before, everybody was forced to just watch the mainstream media, and we know that the mainstream media is heavily compromised. And one thing to note, just to keep in mind, that the mainstream media is not just heavily compromised with regards to Palestine. A lot of people are waking up to this double standards of the media and how they're only fitting one side. We shouldn't be so naive to think that it's only regarding Palestine, right? This is across the board. We're only realizing it because it's so obvious and blatant in the situation of Palestine. But the mainstream media in general, it has its agendas, and we have to be very cognizant of this fact. All of the news, you'll have like 20 different news companies which are reporting the same thing. So you'll think, oh wow, this must be 100% true because all these different news agencies are reporting it. But in reality, they're all getting it from the same source. So does that really mean that all these different people have verified it? No, they're all getting it from one source. We don't even know how true that one source is. So we have to be very careful about where we take news from. Even social media, we cannot believe everything we see on social media, right? We have to know what the trusted outlets are and what are not the trusted outlets. But social media has a great impact, has had a great impact in the past year, alhamdulillah, in changing the narrative. So many people who were against Muslims, who were against Palestinians and were pro-Israel, etc., have completely changed their mind, and now they're completely on a different side. And there's so many people who have accepted Islam, just seeing the strength and the resilience of the Palestinians. And so this is undeniably a great positive that social media has brought about. But there's something we can also utilize social media to push for change. And alhamdulillah, some actual change on the ground has come about due to social media. Now the politicians, unfortunately, they're still not doing really anything, but at least they have to seem like they're doing something. Before, they wouldn't even pretend to try to do something, but now they have to at least pretend to try to do something. We see Biden every few weeks, he's telling people, oh, we're trying to push for a ceasefire, even though we know that the efforts are futile. But at least they're trying to show, which shows that the narrative has shifted, and that's pretty much because of social media. So it's a great benefit of social media and something we can utilize it for. Now, so those benefits we can inshallah use social media for. Now, what are the solutions for all the harms that we mentioned, right? It is possible to use social media and not be harmed by all of those things, but we have to do a few things. So one is, if you cannot avoid the harms, right? And this is a lot of people, right? If you cannot avoid the harms and you feel like if you use social media, you're definitely going to fall into these harms, especially the sins one, right? That's the most important one. Then it might be better to just avoid it completely, just like Allah told us about khamr and alcohol, right? To avoid it completely because the harms are greater than the benefit. So if you cannot avoid these harms and you feel like, you know what, I'm just addicted and every time I do this and I get into these harms, then we know that something that we should actually try to avoid completely. It is possible, right? We shouldn't think that, oh, this is impossible. If you look online, there's a lot of people who are, going away from the digital life and kind of just leaving social media altogether. I have some friends who do that too, and they mention how much peace of mind gives them and how much more productive they are in life. So if you can avoid it completely, that's the best, right? But obviously, if you can't, if you're like most people, you feel like you need to use it, fine, but we have to keep some measures in place, right? One thing we can keep in mind is don't use any and all forms of social media. Some are not worth the risk, right? So we ourselves, I'm not going to mention specific platforms, right? We can decide that for ourselves, inshallah. We're all mature beings. So we should just decide which platforms are good for me, which platforms can I minimize the haram, right? So is there a platform, for example, YouTube, right? A lot of times these ads come up when you watch videos and they have a lot of haram elements. So what are some ways in which you can actually protect yourself from those ads, right? One is pay monthly, right? It might cost a decent amount of money, but you're protecting yourself from the zina of the eyes. and you yourself obviously only watch those videos which do not have these haram elements in it. And so in this way, you're actually protecting yourself from sin. Yeah, it comes with a price, but at least you are protecting yourself from all the haram and all these bad things, right? So in the same way, if there's some way in which you can avoid things that are not in your control, right? You yourself can create your own environment on social media. You can, avoid befriending the opposite gender on social media, so you don't see their pictures, etc. So you're not tempted to build a relationship with them. You can avoid also befriending those people that you know that they're not going to have a clean timeline. They're not going to have a clean, what do you call it? Timeline on their Twitter or on their Facebook, whatever platform it is. They're not going to be posting good things, and so you can avoid following them, or you can avoid adding them, so that you don't see their content as well. And so that's another thing that we can do to purify our environment on social media. Also, we should have controlled usage, right? We should have set times in which we say that, only from this time to this time, I'm going to be using social media. And that could be based on each person, right? If you're already spending hours, like 5-6 hours on social media, or 4 or 5 hours on social media, then keep it to a realistic amount. Be like, okay, I'm only going to spend 2 hours, right? And slowly decrease, right? You can decrease it eventually, hopefully, to half an hour, right? And there's actually there are apps, for example, even on Apple, there you can control your screen time. So when you actually you can set it for a specific app that you only spend a half an hour on that app, for example. So I've actually done that to myself for a specific social media that I found myself using too much, and it's actually been beneficial because that has very drastically decreased my usage on those specific apps, and I find myself wasting less time on those apps. So if we can do this, if we feel like we cannot do it ourselves, then we can, inshallah, utilize technology for that benefit. Then having ad blocks, as I mentioned, right? You can have it on your browser, and ads are a big reason why we see all these bad things on our social media. So we can protect ourselves from that as well through ad blocks. Only follow and friend people you benefit from, your family members, etc. As I mentioned earlier. Only befriend the same gender, which is very important. That's a great means of protecting yourself from a lot of fitna out there. Other than that, there may be other solutions that anybody here can suggest. Is there any suggestions or any comments? Okay, inshallah. So, yeah. Oh, okay. It blocks off what? Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, you can use add-ons, right? That block off all adult content and all, these sorts of haram things, so that you're not able to see these things accidentally, right? One is you're doing it on purpose, you're going out of your way, but a lot of times it happens by accident, and sometimes when you see it by accident, it has an effect on you, and now you start having certain temptations. So if you have these ad block features, then inshallah this will be a great help in protecting yourself from these things, inshallah. That's a very good point. Yeah, mashallah. So nowadays we can check our screen time, go on your settings, and check your screen time. How much time are you actually spending on your phone? And when you check that, sometimes you're shocked, like, what? Did I really just spend 4 hours or 3 hours or this much time? And it actually divides it for you. I spent this much time on social media. I spent this much time on this app. I spent this much time on that app. And so you can actually, from there, plan ahead that, okay, I have to cut this down. This is way too much time that I'm spending on this phone. And so checking that on a regular basis can actually be very motivating because you don't realize you're spending that much time. And so you can easily cut it down by constantly regulating and checking yourself. That's a good point, mashallah. Okay, mashallah. I guess, a good point. Do you know a name of any app like that? Okay. So brother Art mentioned a good point that there are some apps that you can get that block off. One is to generally just limit your app to like 30 minutes or an hour, for example. You can't spend more than that much time. But one is to block off any of these social media apps completely from a certain time to a certain time. So if you want to make sure that you don't spend the whole night scrolling and you get your proper sleep, then you set it, for example, from 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. till like Fajr time for example, 5 a.m., 6 a.m., that all social media apps are blocked, so you literally cannot use them. And obviously, don't give yourself the password, because then you'll just bypass it and use the password. Give a trusted friend or a parent the password, so that you can make sure that you won't do it, and you'll have to go to them to do it. And obviously, they won't do it unless it's beneficial for you, something you really need to do. So that's another great thing that we can do as well, inshallah, to protect ourselves. Oh, nice, mashallah. That's good. Brother Abdulaziz mentioned that there's a dua app where it can remind you different time of the day. For example, if you normally eat at such and such time, it'll remind you at that time that remember to say your du'as before you eat, before you sleep, etc. So that's a good, mashallah, point. So you can be reminded to remember Allah even while you're using your social media, while you're using your phone. Mashallah. Good point, mashallah. So you can even limit on your phone which apps you can download, and you can give the password to somebody you trust. So that you're not just downloading apps, right? The more social media you get, the more time you're going to waste, right? Some people are like, you have this account, this account, this account, this account, and you're checking all those accounts every day. That's using so much time, right? You need to limit the amount of apps that you also download, social media apps. And so you can put a limit to the number of apps you download as well. Oh, it's a very good point. Yeah, mashallah. Brother Muhammad mentioned that, stay busy, right? Keep yourself busy with beneficial things. If you're, for example, spending a decent amount of time exercising, working out, you have a job, you, mashallah, are, studying in college or in school, and you're spending time studying, or you're studying the deen, for example. You come to the masjid, you take the classes that the local masjid is offering, not advertising, just saying. So if you take these classes, if you're spending time in the masjid, you're spending productive time with your friends, for example, then that'll keep you busy. You won't even want to spend time on social media, right? The only time you're spending on social media is when you're, at home, you're not really doing anything. And so you're like, you know what, let me just get on social media, because you literally don't know what else to do. But once you start keeping yourself busy, for example, even getting into reading, right? Obviously, we have to watch what we read as well. But reading in general is a very important habit that a lot of people, when they get onto social media, they actually lose. It's something that happened to me too. When I was young, you can ask my father, he's here. My parents, mashallah, encouraged this, reading. So we used to take us to the library every few days. I used to get like 30 books for the month, and alhamdulillah, I would finish them sometimes even before the month would be done. Yet, once I got a little older, I started getting on social media. That actually dwindled and decreased a lot. And I actually found myself dismayed and kind of shocked that why is it that I can't even read anymore? There was actually a time where, like I would pick up a book, I would get distracted, and maybe I would want to check social media, or it was very jarring and shocking to me that why is this happening to me? I was able to read so much, right? And this actually affected me to the point of, even when I started my Adam course, I didn't have that same amount of reading that I was able to do years before, because those years of high school in which I started using social media, my parents also, alhamdulillah, they did limit our usage. I didn't even get a phone until I was 16. So the later years of high school, when I started using social media, even then it wasn't too much, alhamdulillah, but even then that had a great effect on my reading ability and ability to just concentrate and get through a book, your attention span. And so even when I started my Adam course after high school, I was facing this issue. Alhamdulillah, when it comes to classes, I was focusing and stuff. But after classes, reading extra, taking out that extra time, I was finding it hard. And alhamdulillah, after some time, I did get to the point back to where I was able to read for long periods of time, and even build that love for reading back again, where you were able to just bury yourself into a book and just read and read and read and read. So this is something social media completely destroys the ability to read and the desire to read as well. So you can get into reading, especially beneficial books again, and it has a great benefit. It builds your intellect, it builds your comprehension, and there's so many different benefits that come from reading. Unfortunately, an entire generation is starting to not get at all. So that's also something that we can try to do, inshallah. So basically keep yourself busy in general with good things. That will actually make you not want to even use social media. Alhamdulillah, I think we had some beneficial discussion. Inshallah, it went longer than I expected or hoped. But hopefully, inshallah, it was beneficial for us, inshallah. For all the young guys, inshallah. Yeah, sure. Hmm. 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 Well, hmm. 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 Yeah. Hmm. MashaAllah. MashaAllah, great points. Just to very briefly to summarize what Brother Ilyas mentioned, good points. One is to even keep a physical distance for yourself. One is for your health reasons, because there's some radiation that emits from the phones, and it has an internal effect on you. So even if you read the manuals of your phone, it tells you to keep a distance away. Even when you're sleeping or on a regular basis, we shouldn't have our phones right next to our faces, right? We should keep some distance. And when we're sleeping, we should keep it away from us. And that also has benefits in trying to not being addicted to it as well, because if we have a physical distance, for example, let's say if you're doing some work, if you're keeping your phone next to you, chances are you're going to be pulling it out and checking your phone every few minutes or every once in a while. And you're not able to be as productive in your work as possible. So if you have a physical distance, you keep it in a far place where you have to actually get up and go use if you want to use it. Or yeah, exactly, yeah. Or if you're lying down, right? If your phone's a little far from you, where you have to get up to get it, then you'll be less inclined to spend the night just scrolling through your social media rather than you're just going to go to sleep. So keeping a physical distance has benefits in terms of your health and just in general, stopping yourself from being addicted. Also, brother mentioned about how the quality of your conversations drops because of social media. But at the same time, it can still help because you can just drop a message to your family members on WhatsApp or different apps. And through that, inshallah, you can keep a connection. So, alhamdulillah, I think it was a beneficial and productive conversation. Inshallah, hopefully, we all take lessons and try to limit our social media usage and also try to use it in a beneficial manner and protect ourselves from the harms in social media, inshallah. Inshallah, the young guys, we're going to pray Ishraq. Ishraq is the Nafil Salah, which is prayed after sunrise, about 10 minutes after sunrise. There's great rewards in this, especially if you've prayed Fajr in Jama'ah, you stayed in the masjid, you're remembering Allah. There's a lot of rewards. For example, there's one hadith that mentions if you pray Fajr Salah in Jama'ah and then you stay in that place and then you remain in the remembrance of Allah until sunrise, and then you pray 2 rak'at of nafil, then you get the reward of accepted Hajj and Umrah, right? That's a great reward. And then once you pray 2 more rak'at, when you pray 4 rak'at, there's a hadith that mentions that whoever prays 4 rak'at in the beginning of the day, then Allah will take care of their matters until the end of the day. So inshallah, it's a great way to start the day full of barakah, inshallah. So we're going to pray this salah right now. We're going to pray 2 rak'ats of nafil and 2 rak'ats. Then we'll head to the field, inshallah, and play football or soccer, whatever we decide to end up playing, inshallah. سبحان الله بحمده سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك